The War Council chamber fell silent as Commander Vector slammed his four-fingered fist against the holographic display. The human settlement on Frontier Station 12 had just repelled their third assault wave in as many cycles, and the losses were becoming embarrassing. Impossible, hissed War Marshal Kixara, her mandibles clicking in agitation. 27 of our finest shock troopers vaporized. By one human. One. Vector's eye stalk swiveled toward the replay footage hovering in the air. The grainy thermal scan showed a lone figure moving through their battalion with the casual efficiency of someone taking an evening stroll, except this stroll left a trail of unconscious, disarmed and thoroughly humiliated Kathex warriors in its wake. What do we know about this creature? Vector demanded. Lieutenant Praxinil shuffled his datapad nervously. Her designation is Captain Morgan Kane, human female, approximately 32 solar cycles old by their reckoning. Former Special Operations, decorated in at least 14 planetary conflicts. Current assignment, Security Chief of the Mining Outpost. One guard. Kikazara's voice dripped with disbelief. They have one guard protecting their entire operation? Apparently Praxinil cleared his throat membranes. They deemed it sufficient. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes about how correct that assessment had turned out to be. Vector magnified the image, studying the human's face in the brief moment she'd looked directly at their surveillance drone. She was smiling, actually smiling, as if this were some kind of recreational activity. Her hair, tied back in what humans called a ponytail, was the color of copper wire, and her eyes held the same unsettling green tint as their homeworld's toxic seas. Deploy the Crimson Talons, Vector announced, his decision final. If a standard battalion cannot handle one human, we send specialists. Kirasara's mandibles twitched with what might have been satisfaction. The Crimson Talons have never failed a capture mission. 12 of our finest hunters, trained since hatchling-hood in the art of subduing prey. Good, Vector rumbled. I want this human alive. I want to understand what makes her so dangerous. Perhaps we can replicate it, weaponize it. What none of them mentioned, what hung in the air like the smell of fear pheromones, was the simple fact that Morgan Kane had not killed a single one of their soldiers. She had injured them, certainly. Broken bones, concussions, wounded pride by the shipload. But killed? No, which somehow made it worse. She was toying with them. 3 cycles later, the Crimson Talons stood in the same chamber, receiving their briefing. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Torgash, examined the footage with clinical detachment. She favors her left side when turning, he observed. And see here, she compensates for the lower gravity with longer strides. She has adapted to this environment, but adaptation reveals patterns. Patterns can be exploited. The human cannot be underestimated, Praxinil warned, his voice cracking slightly. Perhaps we should send additional support units. Torgash's laugh was a harsh, barking sound. 12 Crimson Talons are worth 1,200 regular troops. Lieutenant, we have hunted Death Stalkers on Korvax Prime. We have captured rogue war mechs with our bare claws. This soft skin may be skilled, but she is still just flesh and bone. Famous last words, muttered someone from the back of the room. Torgash's head snapped around. Who said that? Nobody answered. The strike team deployed under cover of the night cycle, when Frontier Station 12's sun had set beyond the rocky horizon. They moved like liquid shadow, their armor adapting to the terrain, their weapons primed but set to non-lethal settings. This was a capture mission, after all. The mining outpost sprawled across a small valley, a collection of prefabricated structures and drilling equipment that humans seemed to scatter across every planet they touched. The main operations center sat in the middle, light still burning in several windows despite the late hour. She is in the southern quarters, Torgash whispered into his comm unit, reading the thermal scans. Alone, likely sleeping. We move in teams of 3. Omega pattern, converging from 4 points. Do not engage individually. Overwhelming force. Simultaneous strike. His team acknowledged with clicks and hisses of confirmation. They crept forward, centuries of predatory evolution guiding their movements. The perimeter sensors had been scrambled by their tech specialist. The automated defenses were temporarily blind. Everything was proceeding according to plan, which should have been their first warning. The door to Morgan Kane's quarters stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling out into the cold darkness. Torgash signaled his team to halt. Something felt wrong, too easy, too convenient. Torgash, one of his hunters whispered urgently. The thermal reading, it is not moving at all, not even breathing patterns. A trap. Of course it was a trap. Fall back, Torgash ordered, but the words had barely left his mouth when the lights blazed on across the entire compound. Floodlights, emergency beacons, everything activated at once, turning night into day and ruining their optical camouflage in an instant. And there, standing on top of the operations center with her hands on her hips, was Morgan Kane. She wore what appeared to be sleeping clothes, loose pants and a faded shirt with some kind of human slogan printed across it. Her feet were bare, her hair was down, cascading past her shoulders in those odd copper waves. She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out, her voice carrying easily across the compound. You know, when I got the proximity alert about 12 heavily armed aliens sneaking toward my bedroom, I had to ask myself, do these guys realize how creepy that sounds? Torgash snarled, raising his weapon. Surrender, human. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Am I though? Morgan scratched her head thoughtfully, as if genuinely considering the question. Because from where I am standing, I count 12 of you and 1 of me, which means I have you outnumbered, exactly 12 to 1. Math is funny like that. That makes no sense, hissed one of the Talons. Does not it? Morgan's smile widened. Tell you what, let's make this interesting. I will give you all a 30-second head start. Run, hide, call for backup, pray to whatever gods your species worships. Your choice. Torgash felt rage boiling in his blood. The disrespect, the casual mockery, it was intolerable. We are the Crimson Talons. We do not flee from prey. Prey? Morgan laughed, and the sound sent an involuntary shiver down Torgash's spine. Oh honey, you just made a critical error in threat assessment. But hey, I tried to be nice. 30 seconds starts now. 30, 29, 28. Take her, Torgash roared. All 12 Talons opened fire simultaneously, their stun rounds converging on Morgan's position with mathematical precision. Except she was not there anymore. She had moved, impossibly fast, dropping from the rooftop and rolling behind a storage container before their weapons had even finished cycling. 23, 22, her voice called out from somewhere to their left now. How had she crossed that distance so quickly? The Talons split up, executing their training with professional efficiency, flanking maneuvers, crossfire positions, systematic grid search. But Morgan Kane flowed through their formation like water, never where they expected, always moving, always counting. 17, 16, 15. Torgash caught a glimpse of her between 2 buildings, sprinting at a speed that should have been impossible for a human in this gravity. He fired, but she had already vaulted over a low wall, using it as a springboard to change direction mid-stride. How is she so fast? One of his team gasped. Focus, Torgash commanded. She is 1 target. We are 12. Corner her. Box her in. 10, 9, 8. Morgan's voice seemed to come from everywhere now, echoing off the metal structures, disorienting them. 2 of his hunters converged on her position near the eastern perimeter, weapons raised, ready to fire the moment they had a clear shot. They turned the corner together, perfectly synchronized. Morgan Kane stood there waiting, that infuriating smile still on her face. 3, 2, 1, time's up boys. Hope you brought medical insurance. What happened next would be debated by Kathex military analysts for years to come. Morgan moved like liquid lightning, closing the distance before either Talon could fire. She ducked under the first weapon, used her shoulder to redirect its barrel into his partner's chest, triggering an accidental discharge that sent the second hunter flying backward. The first hunter tried to grab her with his free claw. She caught his wrist, twisted and used his own momentum to flip him completely over her shoulder. He crashed into the ground hard enough to crack his armor plating. 2 down, Morgan announced cheerfully into the night air. 10 to go. Who wants to be next? Torgesh watched through his tactical display as 2 more of his elite hunters went offline in rapid succession. Then 3 more. Morgan was not just defeating them, she was dismantling his entire team with surgical precision, using their own tactics against them, turning their coordinated assault into a chaotic mess. This is impossible, he breathed. Commander, one of his remaining hunters called out, panic edging into his voice. She is everywhere. How can she be everywhere? Because she knew the terrain, Torgesh realized too late. Every container, every building, every shadow and sightline. This was her territory, and they had walked right into her web. Morgan appeared on top of another roof, barely breathing hard despite having just incapacitated 7 elite warriors. You know what the funny thing is? I actually messaged your command ship yesterday. Sent them a nice, polite note asking if you guys wanted to negotiate peacefully. Even offered to share some of our mining data, free of charge. You know what they sent back? Torgesh did not answer. He was too busy trying to reorganize his remaining team, trying to salvage something from this disaster. They sent back a very rude message, Morgan continued, examining her fingernails casually. Something about humans being primitive and weak, and how you were going to dissect me to figure out what makes us tick. Really hurt my feelings. Honestly. She looked up, and her eyes locked onto Torgesh's position with unsettling accuracy. So here is the thing, Commander. I am going to capture all 12 of you tonight. I am going to tie you up with those fancy stun cords you brought to use on me, and then I am going to call your ship and ask them a very important question. Torgesh felt his last 3 hunters move into position around him, forming a protective circle. This was it. 4 against 1. Surely they could manage 4 against 1. Morgan dropped from the roof, landing in a crouch that should have shattered human leg bones but barely seemed to faze her. She stood up slowly, stretching like a cat waking from a nap. Who? She asked, that smile never wavering, is bringing the stretchers. Then she moved, and Torgesh's world became a blur of pain, motion, and the crushing realization that his species had made a terrible, terrible mistake about humanity. The last thing he saw before the stun cord tightened around his limbs was Morgan Kane standing over all 12 of them, pulling out her communication device, and actually laughing. Yeah, hi, this is Captain Kane at Frontier Station 12. I'm going to need medical transport for 12 injured alien soldiers. No rush though, they are not going anywhere. Oh, and tell your war marshal that if she wants to try again, maybe send 20 next time. The girl could use the challenge. As consciousness faded, Torgesh heard her add one more thing. Also, about those peace negotiations, my offer still stands, but the price just went up. The medical transport arrived 6 hours later, just as the twin suns began their slow climb over the horizon. Morgan had spent the time making breakfast, checking her equipment logs, and occasionally wandering over to where the 12 Crimson Talons lay trussed up like festival decorations, to offer them water and painkillers. You really should ice that shoulder, she told one particularly grumpy-looking warrior who kept glaring at her with all 3 of his functional eyes. Rotator cuff injuries are no joke, trust me. The warrior just growled something that her translator mercifully refused to interpret. When the Kathex medical ship touched down, Morgan was sitting on a cargo container drinking coffee and reading something on her datapad. She did not even look up when Commander Vector himself descended the loading ramp, flanked by 20 heavily armed guards. Captain Kane, Vector said, his voice carefully neutral, we have come for our soldiers. Oh good, Morgan took another sip of coffee. I was starting to worry you guys forgot about them. They have been very patient. But I think a few of them really need to use your alien equivalent of a bathroom. Vector's eye stalks twitched. You have caused significant injury to elite members of our military. Have I? Morgan finally looked up, her expression innocent. Funny, I seem to remember them breaking into my home in the middle of the night with weapons. Pretty sure that counts as self-defense in most legal systems. But hey, I am not a lawyer. You could have killed them. Could have, Morgan agreed. Did not though. Notice the pattern. 3 attacks, 0 fatalities. I'm starting to think you guys are not very good at pattern recognition. One of Vector's guards stepped forward aggressively. Morgan did not move, but something in her posture changed. The guard stopped, suddenly uncertain. Easy there, big guy, Morgan said softly. Your buddies over there learned the hard way that I am not interested in killing anyone, but I am very, very good at explaining things through interpretive violence if talking does not work. Vector raised a hand, stopping his guard. What do you want, human? What do I want? Morgan set down her coffee cup. I want to do my job. I want to extract valuable minerals from this rock, send them back to Earth and the other colony worlds, and get paid enough to maybe retire before I am 60. Simple stuff. This system belongs to the Kathex Dominion by right of conquest, Vector stated. Does it, though? Morgan pulled up something on her datapad. Because according to the Galactic Commerce Registry, this system was unclaimed when we filed our mining permits 18 months ago. And according to the Treaty of Vega Station, which your government signed, by the way, first claim goes to whoever registers and maintains active operations. The treaty does not apply to humans, Vector hissed. Your species was not part of the galactic community when it was signed. True, Morgan nodded, but we bought the claim from the Zentheri Collective, who were absolutely part of the galactic community. All legal, all documented, all very boring and official. You can check with the registry office if you want. I will wait. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Vector's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep agitation among his people. You lie, he said finally. Morgan shrugged. Feel free to verify. The Zentheri are great at keeping records. I will give them that. Terrible at small talk, but fantastic bureaucrats. She stood up, dusting off her pants. Here is what I think is actually happening. I think somebody in your government really wants this system, legal claim or not. I think they sent you to scare off what they assumed were weak, primitive humans who would run at the first sign of trouble. And I think you are now realizing that humans are neither weak nor primitive, just really good at looking harmless until it is too late. Vector said nothing. So, Morgan continued, you have options. Option 1. You take your people and leave. We file an official complaint with the Galactic Council. You get a diplomatic slap on the wrist. Everybody moves on. Option 2. You keep sending soldiers. I keep sending them back in pieces, metaphorically speaking. Eventually somebody escalates, and this gets really ugly, really fast. Or, she added, her smile returning, Option 3. You actually read the proposal I sent your war marshal. The one about joint mining operations, profit sharing, and mutually beneficial cooperation. You know, the boring option that does not involve anybody getting their face rearranged. One of the Crimson Talons, still lying on the ground, made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Hard to tell with alien physiology. Vector's eye stalks swiveled to look at his defeated elite unit, then back to Morgan. You defeated 12 Crimson Talons, alone, in under 10 minutes. 8 minutes, actually, Morgan corrected. But who is counting? How? Morgan considered the question. Want the honest answer? Your people are strong, Commander. Probably 3 times stronger than baseline humans. Your reflexes are good. Your tactics are solid. Your equipment is top-notch. But you know what you are not. She paused for effect. Desperate. See, humanity spent most of its history fighting itself. We got really, really good at combat, because we had to, and then we left Earth and found out the universe is full of species that are bigger, stronger, and scarier than us. So we adapted, we trained, we studied every species we met, learned their weaknesses, developed countermeasures. Morgan walked over to where Torgesh lay, crouching down to his level. You guys have been the apex predators in your corner of space for so long, you forgot what it feels like to be prey. Humans never had that luxury. We have been prey since we climbed down from the tree. She stood back up. Evolution is funny like that. The prey that survives gets smarter, faster, meaner. Your elite soldiers train for honor and glory. Human special forces train because if we fail, our entire species might disappear. Kind of changes your perspective. Vector was quiet for a long moment. Then surprisingly he began to laugh. It was a strange, clicking sound, but definitely laughter. "What is funny?" Morgan asked, genuinely curious. "My intelligence officers," Victor said, still clicking with amusement. "They assured me humans were not a threat. They said you were soft, dependent on technology, physically inferior." To be fair, Morgan admitted, most humans are pretty soft. "I am what you might call an outlier. But here is the thing, Commander. You have been attacking the wrong target. This station, me, we are just one tiny outpost. But Earth alone has 8 billion humans. The colonies have another 3 billion scattered across 20 systems. And everyone from the farmers to the politicians to the kids in schools, everyone knows the universe is dangerous." She let that sink in. "You want to know what scares me about humanity?" Morgan continued. "It is not our soldiers or our weapons. It is the fact that if you actually threatened Earth, you would not be facing soldiers. You would be facing accountants with hunting rifles, teachers with improvised explosives, and teenagers with hacked drones. Because we are all just a little bit crazy, and we all carry this weird evolutionary memory that says fight or die." Vector's eye stalks drooped slightly. "You are saying we cannot win." "I am saying you should not try," Morgan corrected. "Look, I actually like you guys. The Kathex have a rich culture, amazing engineering, and you make this fermented drink that tastes like battery acid but gets you fantastically drunk. Why fight when we could trade? Why waste resources on war when we could both profit from peace?" "The war marshal will never agree," Vector said quietly. "She believes humanity must be crushed before we become too powerful." "Then the war marshal is an idiot," Morgan said bluntly. "No offense. None taken. She is in fact an idiot." Morgan laughed, surprised. "You know what? I like you, Commander. You seem reasonable. So here is what we are going to do. You take your people home, get them patched up, and you tell your war marshal that Captain Morgan Kane respectfully invites her to sit down for actual negotiations. Neutral territory, mediators from the Galactic Council, the whole official thing. And if she refuses?" Morgan's smile turned cold. "Then tell her I will personally visit your homeworld and challenge her to single combat. Winner takes the system. I believe that is legal under Kathex honor codes, right?" Vector's mandible spread in what might have been a grin. "It is, though I should warn you, Kixarara is twice your size and has killed in over 300 duels." "Great," Morgan said cheerfully. "I love a challenge. Though honestly, I would prefer the boring negotiation option. Much less paperwork." The medical team had begun loading the injured Crimson Talons onto stretchers. Torgash, still conscious, caught Morgan's eye as they carried him past. "You are a demon," he rasped. "Nah," Morgan replied. "Just another human doing a job. But I appreciate the compliment." As the medical ship prepared for departure, Victor paused at the loading ramp. "Captain Kane, may I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Are all humans like you?" Morgan thought about it. "Honestly, no. I am probably in the top 1% of the top 1% when it comes to combat capability. Most humans are scientists, artists, engineers, parents, regular people living regular lives. Then why does your species entrust frontier security to individuals like yourself?" "Because," Morgan said simply, "out here on the edge, you need people who can handle the unexpected. People who will not panic when things go sideways. We learned a long time ago that the best way to keep peace is to make absolutely sure nobody wants to test whether you are bluffing." Victor nodded slowly. "And are you bluffing?" Morgan's expression did not change, but something flickered in her green eyes. Something old, something dangerous, something that had survived because it refused to die. "You tell me, Commander. Did your Crimson Talons think I was bluffing?" Victor had no answer to that. The medical ship lifted off, its engines washing the compound in waves of displaced air. Morgan stood watching until it disappeared into the morning sky, then returned to her coffee, which had gone cold. "Computer," she said to the base AI, "send a message to Earth Command. Subject line: diplomatic situation escalating. Message body: The Kathex tried sending their version of special forces. It did not go well for them. Recommend we fast-track diplomatic relations before somebody does something stupid. Also, can you authorize hazard pay? I think scaring off elite alien warriors counts as a workplace hazard. The AI beeped acknowledgement. Morgan finished her cold coffee, grimaced, and headed back to her quarters. She had reports to file, equipment to maintain, and probably another sleepless night wondering if the Kathex would take the hint or if she would have to get creative with defenses again. Being the only guard on a frontier mining station was supposed to be easy duty. Boring even. Nobody had mentioned she would be starting interstellar incidents before breakfast. But then again, nobody had asked if she was up for the job either. They had just looked at her record, seen the scars both visible and invisible, and figured she could handle it. They were right, of course. Morgan Kane could handle just about anything. 3 weeks later, a Kathex diplomatic vessel arrived at Frontier Station 12. War Marshal Kisara herself descended, flanked by advisors, and looking deeply uncomfortable. Morgan greeted them wearing her cleanest uniform, her hair properly tied back, her sidearm visible but holstered. War Marshal, she said formally, welcome to Frontier Station 12, I appreciate you coming. Kisara's mandibles clicked irritably. You left me little choice, human. Commander Vector was very persuasive about the futility of continued military action. He seemed like a smart guy, Morgan agreed. Coffee? Fair warning, it is strong enough to strip paint, but it grows on you. I do not consume stimulants, Kisara said stiffly. Your loss. Shall we talk business then? They talked for 6 hours. The initial hostility gradually gave way to grudging respect, then to actual productive negotiation. The Kathex needed the rare minerals in the system for their ship drives. Humans needed trading partners and allies in this region of space. Both sides needed to not waste resources fighting. By the end they had the framework for an agreement. Joint operations, profit sharing, mutual defense pacts. Everything Morgan had originally proposed, just with more legal language and formal ceremony. As Kisara prepared to leave, she paused. Captain Kane, I must ask, could you truly have defeated me in single combat? Morgan met her gaze steadily. Honestly, I have no idea. You are bigger, stronger, more experienced. But I would have fought like my entire species depended on it, because that is what humans do when we are cornered. We fight. Even when the odds are impossible. Especially then, Morgan smiled. We are weird like that. Kisara's mandibles spread in what Morgan had learned was a Kathex smile. Perhaps there is hope for your species after all, Captain. Though you should know you have earned a reputation among our military. They call you the Smiling Demon. Could be worse, Morgan laughed. They could call me the Crazy Coffee Lady. Is there a difference? Fair point. The diplomatic ship departed. Morgan returned to her quarters, filed her final report, and finally allowed herself to relax. The crisis was over. Peace had won out over war, and all it took was embarrassing the pride of an alien military force and making them realize humans were too much trouble to conquer. Just another day in the United Earth Colonial Service. Morgan poured herself a fresh cup of coffee, sat on the roof of the operations center as the sun set, and wondered what other impossible situations the universe would throw at her. Whatever they were, she would handle them. With a smile,